Welcome viewers to the second season of Marketing in the Altered World, where I've been talking to marketing leaders post the pandemic to figure out how marketing has transformed or is transforming, and what are some learnings and unlearnings which the marketing leaders had to do to be more relevant in this new normal. Today, my guest is Raji Raghavan, or popularly known as Raji. She is the head of marketing and corporate communications and is responsible for driving global marketing and branding strategy at Firstsource. In her earlier stint, she has worked with leading brands like P&G, McCann Erickson, Aventus India, Ajuba Solutions, among others. She's been a recipient of many awards as well, from NASCOM and World HRD Congress for her marketing campaigns and around recruitment, I think, right? Recruitment branding is what I say. And also for women leadership from World HRD Congress. So Raji, really nice to have you with us here today. Thanks for taking this time.
Thanks. It's nice to be a part of this. Now you'll have to clarify something for me. Do I address you as Dr. Karthik or will Karthik do?
Please call me Karthik.
Okay, so we're on first name basis now, and we can get started. Thanks for the glowing introduction. Kind of sounds a little awkward to hear this.
No, in fact, we need to have those kind of introductions for women leaders in particular, because you are an inspiration to a lot of aspiring women out there. So that's definitely calls for that. So Raji, how has the pandemic treated you as a marketing leader? So what have been some learnings and unlearnings which you had to do?
I think personally, it's been a period of huge creativity. I think it's just been, there's just possibilities that you explored that you wouldn't do in a so-called normal world. I think I can probably say it for everybody who's watching this, talk is that if you hear me or if I hear the words next normal one more time, I will lose it kind of a thing. It's just so much of it. But just coming back to the topic, it's been an extremely interesting, it's been a period of extreme creativity. And I hear similar things from peers across because, some of the stuff from the marketing pack gets taken away. For example, while events, are doing their best to give the best possible experience, it is a diluted experience, for whatever it's worth. So you need to be extremely creative. And I think one of the biggest way to show creativity apart from your visual creative to be a distinct brand is your content creative, right? How well you do your content, because it was always a noisy world. It's just got noisier because of pandemic. So I think it's a period of challenge and of extreme creativity for folks who are lucky to be this community that we call marketing professionals.
That's so true. In fact, everything now seems to be content. So, in fact, this second season, I was thinking, let me focus on how do we rethink content itself, because now that everything is going digital, and because physical events are still quite a period off. So, content marketing seems to be the in thing now, which everybody is looking at, right? So, what are some challenges that you as a marketing leader or your team is currently facing when it comes to content marketing per se?
So I think I'll take a step behind and not just as marketing, but just look at teams the way we are working. And we are marketers are creative function, and this is the first time we're working pretty much 100% virtual. And usually for creative conversations, you sit with a person. There's hours of conversations, and then you get input. So we're having to do without it, and I think the technology has been helpful. We've been talking a lot more, but I think just managing the teams, ensuring that their creativity doesn't get impacted by the way we are working, practicing empathy with your team members, especially people who are joining in new in your team. You have to be empathetic to know that this is a very different world and this is a very different experience. So I think that's something we, not just as marketers, everybody across in the corporate world is, putting people first as they should always do. I think if you have great team, great people, then the creativity happens. So that is important. Second, in terms of just coming to, more transactional content marketing related challenges, like I said, it's the world has just got noisier in terms of content. When the so-called next normal hit, there were a lot of brands which kind of jumped into the bandwagon and started messaging around it. And some of them, some big brands also came under fire for just giving lip service and in a rush to say something and to be heard. uh, doing content marketing for the sake of it, is probably not the best way to approach it. So brands are facing challenges of how to be distinctive, how to cut through the noise and clutter. And I'm sure it's not easy for the customer as well, right? Because if you're looking for real good content, you are having to wade through a lot of stuff to get to what you really want. So the challenge has been on both sides, but like I said, the world has just gotten noisier, Karthik. I think that's a problem for most content marketers.
That's so true. One thing which I think which has also happened during this entire pandemic has been binge watching on your OTT platforms per se, right? So at least for B2C brands, you have, and you since you've been talking so much about creativity, so I think for B2C brands, they tend to experiment a lot more with their content and the formats and things like that, right? And B2B generally is perceived to be a lot more serious, and there is like a fixed template and a format, and you typically tend to follow that. So how do you think going forward B2B content can be more fast paced than what they're currently doing, or what formats can we experiment with from a B2B content perspective?
You raise an interesting point, right? The way you treat B2C content to B2B content is very different. It's almost like we assume that in the B2B marketing space, there are no people. There are just organizations, nameless, faceless, while B2C is all about people. I think
Correct, correct.
that's one of the biggest, mistake that we make, of thinking that when you're doing B2B marketing, you're talking to organizations, nameless, faceless entities, large brands, but not really people. But on the other side, it's folks like us, right, who are looking
Hmm.
for real value, who are looking for content that makes them smarter, makes them look good, makes them do their work more properly. So, I have been a big proponent of looking at B2B also through a B2C lens, in terms of
Yes.
think about the person on the other side. What is her aspiration? What is she
Hmm.
trying to do with her day? What can I do to make her better? So I think it's important, to the moment you start thinking of it like that and
Hmm.
do, what now marketers call as persona based marketing.
Yeah.
You bring the customer to life, and once you know that you're talking to a human, you talk to them like you're talking to a human and not you're talking to a robot. So I
Yeah.
think that makes a big difference. uh, the second is fast paced, yes, but in my team I tell my team that, I'm okay with us making fewer content, but let's make really good content.
Yeah.
I don't like to, tick boxes on a large editorial calendar saying that, we created so many content for the sake of creating content. So it's not easy. It's really hard, because good content takes a lot of time, but your content fuels your marketing campaigns, right? So you need to have decent content to run that too. So it's a
Yeah.
challenge. Answering your question, I think your B2B customers are no different from B2C. They engage with more interactive video formats
Hmm.
than blocks of text.
Hmm.
So video has been the way to go, and I think it will continue to be the way to go, unless there's something more exciting that comes up.
Hmm.
Content when done in a scannable format. So I think we're moving from snackable to scannable, right? Because if
Hmm.
and I observe how I consume content, right? I go through stuff, but I'm really looking for bullet points that catches my interest, and then I read on that specific bullet point. But otherwise, I don't think anybody really reads every single word that you write with so much love and passion.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I think that's a challenge. And the way I like to sum up, and I said it in one of my earlier conversations in an industry forum, is that people don't consume marketing content.
Hmm.
They consume stuff that they find interesting and valuable, and sometimes that's marketing content. So I think that's the way one should look at it, right?
That's very nicely put. In fact, what typically happens, and I recently covered this as part of my book, The Thought Leader Way, is where from a B2B and content in particular, right? So we say, is it demonstrating thought leadership, or I as a brand wants to showcase thought leadership effectively to my customers. And as part of the research which I was doing, and there was some very interesting data that I came across as well, which also said that from a B2B buyer's standpoint, right, about over 60% of them actually were evaluating that the service provider basis the thought leadership that they were showcasing. And in fact, over 40% of them were even willing to pay a premium for the brand if they were convinced that these guys are thought leaders in their space. But typically, what we see is, like you rightly said, all of them tend to have a robust editorial calendar without the content actually having a unique point of view per se. So if brands have to think or rethink their content on how they can demonstrate thought leadership effectively, what would be some advice that you can give to them?
Okay, I don't think I'm an expert to give an advice, but I'd say that the word thought leadership is again a much abused phrase. We think that any long format content is thought leadership, but for me, a thought leadership is really something that talks about a very unique point of view, right? And sometimes maybe contrarian to what popular point of view is. It's
Yeah.
thought leadership is like an interesting person that you meet, right? The interesting person,
Mm.
interesting conversations, all about when somebody has a very strong point of views on some subjects, right? It's not about repeating what's already been heard everywhere. It's
Mm.
about how you see it, and in a very different way, insights that come from your experience, which is not published everywhere.
Mm.
So I think thought leadership is important as long as you give it the respect and treat it like a thought leadership piece, and not just creating one more white paper that you can
Yeah.
add. Again, I'm not saying it's easy, it's tough. I struggle with it every single day, so I'm sure everybody struggles with it. It's easier to say it in a 20-minute talk, but it's tough.
True.
One of the things you can really take advantage of is that apart from doing thought leadership, that's your opinion piece, talking to your industry leaders and SMEs and getting their point of view. It helps if you layer it with some of the observers in the industry, right? For example, analysts or
Yeah.
academia,
Mm.
who
Mm.
have a lot of background and depth. So usually when you co-partner with institutes or with entities like
Yeah.
that, it's with the intent to deliver great value to the reader, right? You're doing it for the value that delivers to the reader. You want to make sure that you can give them that. So thought leadership needs to kind of be the forefront of what you do. uh, Less is more. Create very few in a year, commit yourself to a very few in a year, but when you do it, it should be something that you're proud to put your name behind and saying that this is something that me and my team worked on, and I'm happy to have it out there. It's good to do a few of those, or none at all, instead of
Mm.
getting staying too loyal to your editorial calendar. I think it's
Yeah.
okay. The planning is important, plans are useless, right? So you should probably approach it like that.
Correct, correct. There's an interesting point that you mentioned about involving observers in the content creation process itself, and in particular academia that you mentioned about. Because typically, what I've seen and with interaction with few of our clients, uh, the moment you say, "Well, how about doing something with academia?" the first thing that they say is, "No, but they are very theoretical, so I don't think they will understand the business context of it." But in reality, it's actually different because these guys are on advisory boards for a lot of companies, so they tend to have a view into the industry and where it's heading, and hence bring that other perspective to the entire content itself. So I think that's one thing which even I would encourage a lot of uh, companies to explore on
If I
that.
may just comment on it, I'm a huge admirer of the intellectual depth that academia brings in.
Yeah.
Okay, and we are talking about academics who are not just bound to classroom. Most of the
Correct.
academics right now are not bound to classroom. They are
Yeah.
consulting, big brands and clients. It's not like they live in a bubble and they don't understand how the business world works. I
Yeah.
think that's completely misreading the value that they can bring. So
Yes.
I think it adds a good perspective to your thought leadership plans if you
Mm.
were to involve some industry experts as well, apart from creating content which is based on POV from your own business leaders, who
Yeah.
again are the experts really, right? Because they know
True.
what they're talking to their customers, they know what the customers are saying, and they understand how the business is moving. So it's got to be a mix, but I wouldn't shun one for the other.
Yeah, in fact, that's right. Any good content piece will actually have multiple stakeholders involved in it, and if you spend more time on identifying those right stakeholders, then obviously you will have that ROI on the content that you're creating as well,
That is correct.
right? So, on that same note, any content marketing campaign or any brand which you admire for the kind of content marketing which they typically do, and why?
Actually, yes. And while I see a lot from big brands, one brand which has consistently been really, really awesome in creating content, and I admire them because I'm their target audience, and
Hmm.
I feel so strongly about is a brand called Hubspot. They do marketing
Yeah.
automation. They target CMOs.
Yeah.
And the thing that I like about their content is it's an extremely generous way of doing content marketing, in the
Yeah.
sense that the investment that they make in creating value for marketing teams is very phenomenal. So if you go through their programs, and you'll see most marketers, what they sort would have gone through a HubSpot program,
Yeah.
one or two. I think they do a really good job of creating good understanding of marketing with the marketing community and the kind of content that a CMO would want their team to go through,
Hmm.
and their ability to kind of keep you in their website with their content is amazing, because once you
Yeah.
it's like getting into a rabbit hole, right? You see, read one content and then you see something really interesting, you click on this, and before you know it, you've been sitting on a website for 15 minutes, which is unthinkable in the times that we live in with such
Correct.
short attention span. So that is one brand I think does a phenomenal job of content marketing.
So true. So true. So true. So there is one challenge which I think most marketing leaders grapple with, and especially when it comes to content and content marketing, is whether you do it in-house or you outsource it. What, according to you, will be that secret sauce or the best recipe that you would give for any brands who are embarking on that?
I'm a big believer in the blended model. I think it's because content is some of the pieces of content, especially in an industry like the one that I work out of. There's just so many industry verticals. To expect just your internal team to have a complete understanding versus experts from those specific industries, right? So I believe in, and my recommendation would be to have a blended model. You do need your internal content desk, because there's a lot of short-term content or content repurposing,
Yeah.
that involves, it doesn't involve too much, but you need somebody to do that. And you need somebody sometimes quickly to create quick content for an event or something. But usually it's a big mix. So I work with a variety of content writers, in different geographies, to suit different time zones, to
Yeah.
suit different types of writing styles and expertise, because it's not just subject matter, right? It's also sometimes you want a specific style of writing.
Yeah.
Sometimes you want very a lot of business speak because the content and the context demands it.
Yeah.
Sometimes you want something a little bit more airy, and you want a slightly more lighter way of writing a piece of content instead of trying to make it intense and serious. So the magic lies in combination. If you were to do a Venn diagram, it's somewhere in the
Yeah.
center, right, which overlaps your model of external, internal, industry, academia. So you need a nice balanced mix, and pick the writer based on the context for which you're building your content. That's how I approach it.
Okay, so hybrid is the way forward. I think
Hybrid is the
hybrid
way to
is
go.
the way forward for a lot of things, right? Even from working ways, we're going to be working from home partly, going back to office a bit. I think hybrid that way will be, a key thing going
Yeah, we don't live in a binary world at all. I think we live in a very, very fluid world. So I think we need to keep, all possible combinations available, and pick just what is just right for what you're doing at that moment.
Absolutely. Now, at this point, I would ask you to wear the hat of, probably a crystal ball gazer, and then tell me, what do you see as the future of content marketing?
The future, I think we are kind of, to sound cliched, and I apologize for that, is that we are actually living in the future. This is not something that anybody could foresee. None of the business
Yeah.
leaders or industry reports that you read could have in their crystal ball talked about a pandemic where the whole world gets shut down, right? So I think it's a little bit too arrogant to assume that you can crystal ball this. I think that the the way to go is to do some of the good things that you can do really well. So one is that your interactive video content for your B2B customers. I mean, we need to prioritize. We need to think of B2B customers as people and not nameless, faceless. So think of a person when you're writing or creating a content. Think of it as you,
Mm.
because us marketers have to be empathetic. If we're not empathetic, then there's very little that we can bring to the table. So understanding what the customer wants, creating content that's helpful for her, creating content in a format that she likes and she finds engaging, with a combination of style that she might find engaging. So you have to bring everything to the table. I think the medium, the format, the style of content, and the topic. Okay, it takes a lot. It takes a lot. It's easier to say it. It's very, very difficult to do it, but it won't be fun if it wasn't difficult, right? So that's why all of us are hooked to marketing and we do this work. But I would say interactive content,
Mm.
written for people and not for nameless faceless organizations, written in a style that suits that specific context, written in partnership with the right kind of expertise, in-house, outside, I don't care, but just get the right people to do the right piece. It's like bringing, it's a little bit of alchemy, right? You bring all these components and create one content, then when you move to a different type of content, the ingredients change, but you have to still create similar magic. So
True.
that's how I think about it.
True, true. In fact, it's very interesting that you brought up the word empathy many times during our conversation, and even during my book launch, Marshall Goldsmith was also talking about the same thing, and he said that's one area where I think as marketers we tend to miss out. And even when I look at any curriculum that is taught at MBAs, I still don't see empathy being a strong focus subject in marketing. We talk about all the four P's and all the fancy models which are there, but there is not much focus on empathy. So I think as fellow marketing leaders, I think that's something that we need to bring it up for future generations of marketers who come in out there. I'm saying that how empathy is going to be a lot more crucial going forward. And I like your point of saying that, remember that you're creating content for a person out there. It's not a nameless, faceless organization or something that you're looking at. It's the person who's consuming that content and make it as interactive and useful for that purpose, for that person per se. So thanks, Raji, once again. It was real lovely talking to you. Very practical insights, and I'm sure the audience will love those insights that you've shared. Thanks once again for your time.
Lovely talking to you too. I think talking about content marketing is something I really enjoy. It's like having a really good conversation around it, and you can talk about it endlessly. But
Yeah.
it's been fun talking to you, Karthik. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.